Good evening, everyone. We are so excited to welcome you all to Silence the Same Community Conversation. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. We just want to give some folks a little bit of time to come on in the room, get situated, and we will go ahead and get started here in just a few minutes. So thank you guys so much for joining us. If you guys are just joining us, we will get started here in just a few seconds. We're so excited to let you guys in on this little bit of conversation through Silence to Shame and really talking about breaking the cycle of mental illness and incarceration. So just give us a few more seconds to let folks in and we'll go ahead and get us going. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Jewel Gooding, and I am the Executive Director for Silence to Shame. And we are excited to bring to you another enjoying community conversation, talking just a little bit about breaking the cycle of mental illness and incarceration. We have a dynamic panel here. We are so excited to bring to you all this evening. And we are excited to thank our sponsor at Greenberg Tart for allowing us to really have this conversation and really bringing that intersection of mental health and criminal justice overall. So thank you all again for sponsoring us. Just a few housekeeping tips, you guys. If you have questions, you are free to type those in the Q&A function. If you want to raise your hand, and we can definitely try to acknowledge you from there as well. We are also live on Facebook, so we are excited for those who are following us there as well. And please feel free to click that share button so that we can continue to share this great information going out. So at this time, I am excited to bring to you Ms. Karen Greer, who will be moderating our community conversation. And Ms. Greer is our CBS Channel 46 anchor, and she is going to give you guys just a little bit about herself and introduce to you all to this wonderful conversation that we will have today. So thank you all again and continue to tune in.
Jewel, thank you so much. We are excited to be here. This is a very important conversation. This is a conversation that needs to be had regularly because, being in the news business for more than 30 years here in Atlanta, I have seen just what we're talking about, worked on stories from, classrooms, the pipeline from school to prison to incarceration for so many of our young people. I've talked to so many of them, met them. So this is an opportunity for us to try to dig in a little deeper and look for signs, look for ways we can help. And we can do that with this amazing panel we have with us today. So I want them to move right ahead and start introducing themselves to you. So we're going to begin with Dr. Vaughn Gay. He is Executive Director of Holistic Atlanta. Dr. Gay, tell us a little bit about your organization and how this is important to you.
Absolutely. Karen, thank you so much for having us here this evening. Jewel and Shanti as well. We thank Silence to Shame for organizing such a great conversation. My name is Dr. Vaughn Gay. I'm a licensed professional counselor and the Executive Director of Holistic Atlanta. We are a healthcare startup that provides pediatrics and mental health services here in the Metro Atlanta area. We focus a lot of our efforts on underrepresented populations and those that don't necessarily have the access that the everyday person has to quality healthcare. So we are very excited to be involved in this type of conversation and bring an understanding of mental health and knowing that mental health also includes not only our thoughts, but our behaviors and our emotions. And we're going to see how those two, the behaviors and emotions, really have an impact on what we're talking about in terms of the criminal justice system. So thank you again for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm muting just to make sure I don't overstep your microphone. Appreciate you. Next, we've got somebody who's very important to this whole process, knows what we're talking about, deals with this daily, and that is Judge Asha Jackson she is the Chief and Administrative Judge for Dekalb County Superior Court. Judge Jackson.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you to Shanti and to everyone involved with Silence the Shame. I am indeed honored to be here. As Karen just said, I am the Chief and Administrative Judge in DeKalb County, what also covers Rockdale County. I work with the state of Georgia by sitting on the Executive Council of the Council of Accountability Court Judges. That is the governing body that provides oversight, education, training, and funding to all of the in-court accountability court programs focusing on drugs, alcohol, drinking, and mental illness in the state of Georgia. We are very excited about the outcomes that we're seeing in the criminal justice system. I am the founder of the DeKalb County Felony Mental Health Court. That's an honor that I'm very proud of. And I'm proud to champion all of us here today. And I say all of us because mental illness can be chronic or acute. And I think we'll hear that from Dr. Gay later. But it is important that we are not ashamed of this topic, that we make sure people have the tools necessary to address their challenges, that we all understand that people are living right next door to us who have an interaction oftentimes with the criminal justice system. So there's no such thing as putting people away and hiding them. But most importantly, that we all know and understand this illness, because it is through ignorance that people tend to react and become afraid. That's what fear is, false evidence appearing real. So I'm just so happy that we're here today to discuss this topic, particularly as it pertains to our community and the criminal justice community. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you so much, Chief Judge Jackson. Now someone, everybody in the media works with daily because he's got just about every case going on in Metro Atlanta. A dear friend from the Chicago area, Mawali Davis from the Davis Bozeman Law Firm. Thank you for joining us. Talk a little bit about you and why this is so important.
Thank you, Karen. It's good to see you. Good to see everyone. I'm broadcasting here from DC. We have just been a part of an organizing effort around voting rights, and what we know and realize through our practice of law is that so many of our young people who end up in the criminal justice system have had a mental health crisis of some sort, and that they are not being handled in the way that we know is in their best interest and is in our best interest as a community. Specifically, we represent the family of Shali Tilson, a young man who had a mental health crisis in Rockdale County. It's been now nearing 3 years, and he had a mental health crisis. And rather than being taken to a mental health hospital for his crisis, he was locked in solitary confinement. And 9 days later, Shali Tilson died of severe dehydration. So his family experienced in the most horrific of ways the impact when we don't handle mental health crises in our community, in the criminal justice system, in a humane and a healthy way. And so I just want to lift his name and continue to lift the name of others who have had to go through this experience and not had the support that we all know we need to give, should give, and must give. So again, I'm grateful for the work that Shanti has done over these years, and I'm grateful to be a part of this important conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. We know what a year this has been, 2020, 2021, this pandemic locally, nationally, when it comes to health. And then what we've seen around racial injustice this past year. As we know, our television screens have been packed with images that none of us have wanted to see or believe, that we've never wanted to talk to our children about, but we've had to because of how many there have been. We're also seeing a huge uptick in anxiety, depression among men, women, children of color in our community. And there's one group that seems to be neglected in getting the access to mental health care that they need. And those are the people who are incarcerated, especially Black and brown offenders. About 37% of people in prison have a history of mental health problems, according to a 2017 report from the US Department of Justice. So how do we draw a line between decriminalizing mental illness and instituting the best outcomes for the individuals involved in this, who we know at the time, who parents will say, don't shoot him, he's having an issue, please don't frighten him. We just want you to get him off the streets, or her, and help us handle this. So we hope this panel will help shed some light on the crisis around mental illness and incarceration in our community that we've been seeing. We're going to begin with you, Dr. Gay. Can you give us a bit of history around mass incarceration, mental illness in the Black community, and how it seems to really have become a cycle in our community?
Yeah, we could go back to the beginning of time, and just in examining this specific relationship, but in terms of looking at it from a modern approach, we really can go back to the 1970s, the early 70s, the late 60s, early 70s. This is where we saw a deinstitutionalization of mental health. And so for a long time, we dealt with mental illnesses in institutions and mental health hospitals. And during that time, right around post-civil rights, when the civil rights movement started to wane and we start to have some policies put in place, there were policies that were being instituted that we weren't paying attention to. And so what happened was all those individuals that were serviced in one location were now being referred out to community-based organizations. And now, in the 21st century, we call them community service boards. But back then, it was a very loose patchwork system of being able to get assistance. And even we think about the mental health hospitals during that time, they were placed out in the furthest part of town to kind of remove these people from society. At the same time, we saw a shift in our penology and our approach of penology within the criminal justice system. And we started to notice that while crime was decreasing, there's what we started to see, the war on poverty with President Nixon during that time. And the war on poverty led into the war on drugs, and the war on drugs kind of led into, just continuous efforts over the 80s and the 90s. And so we started to see a relationship between the criminal justice system, the education system, and then also the approaches to mental health care, and recognizing that by releasing individuals back out into the community did not have the resources to address issues with depression, anxiety, those things that were being dealt with within the hospital. And so we started to see an exacerbation of social issues like homelessness, domestic violence, and then individuals that just start to have psychotic episodes within the community. When you don't have the resources in place within the community to be able to deal with a behavioral or an emotional issue, the first thing we do is to go to the public safety office, right? During that time as well, in the 80s, we started to see shifts in the policies, and we saw these zero tolerance policies in schools, and also the shift in the legislation with crime. And you had the crime bills and the things within the early 1990s. All these different things, created I guess like the perfect storm for us to start targeting individuals that had behavioral health, mental health, and emotional health issues, and allowing them to be the individuals that were funneled into this system of mass incarceration that we saw being revealed to us in the 1980s and the 1990s. And so where that brings us to modern day times, right now, America, we have over 2 million people that are locked away right now. And I believe the number is 6 million that are under the correctional control with us through probation, parole, or actually incarceration. And we still have this patchwork system of mental health providers, especially when we start looking at the Black community, right? We're just now starting to see a rise in the number of private practitioners. We see the wellness and advocacy groups. But in terms of like a true system, when we say the system is broken, it's actually not even solidified, and it's not even there, to be honest with you.
And that's what's so frightening. And we're looking at how we're moving people through this system that is really holding them down. Let's move over to you, Judge Jackson, and talk a little bit about Black, brown, African-American people with mental health conditions, specifically those involving psychosis, we've learned are more likely to be in jail or prison than people of other races. As a judge, in the state of Georgia. Can you discuss some interventions that you've seen, that you've created, which I love talking about what you're doing to make a difference in our community, that are addressing the intersection of mental illness and the legal system? And are you aware of any other initiatives that address the cycle of incarceration and mental illness? Judge Jackson, can we unmute you?
Thank you. Modern technology, right? We have to remember to reach up and unmute. I was saying that in the state of Georgia, some 20 plus years ago, Judge Winston Bethel, who was our chief magistrate court judge in Dekalb County, started to look at this issue and became one of the first courts in Georgia to actually incorporate a treatment model, if you will, into the courts. And he did so. It wasn't an accountability court. It was a diversion treatment court. And so you'll hear those terms used sometimes interchangeably, but they're different, because diversion means you want to send people completely out of the system. Because it was a magistrate court, and a lot of times you're talking about misdemeanor level offenses, it's easier to do that. He was able to get people connected with this network, if you will, that Dr. Gay talked about, this broken, because there's no statewide or nationwide network. A lot of these community service boards are individually run and operated throughout the state and throughout many of the states. But that led to people looking more closely at the root causes of why individuals were coming in contact with the criminal justice system to begin with. And because DeKalb County and Fulton County and some of the others are in the metro circuits in and near Atlanta, we were able to be among the first to really have large treatment courts in the state. Largely funded by some federal grants and federal entities that were looking at the issues of mass incarceration. And then in DeKalb County, what sparked from that movement was the development of a drug court. There were two tracks of drug courts. You had one track that had individuals who perhaps had more what we call stability factors. So they had family members and friends who they had been connected to, and they didn't need supportive services like housing or a treatment provider. But more often than not, in track one, there are more high risk, high need individuals. And that's who's in the mental health court program that I run, quite frankly, and in track one of drug court around the state. Very high risk, high need individuals in the Black and Brown community, many of whom do not have supportive factors like family members with whom they are still connected, many of whom have come to the state of Georgia from other cities. And they just oftentimes don't have a real diagnosis. They know something's wrong. They keep having a touch with the criminal justice system, but they've never had the opportunity to involve a medical professional and a care team to really look at what the medical diagnosis is. And I hope we will spend some time talking about why that is important. Because oftentimes these individuals are hopeless because they feel like, and they've been told something's wrong with you, something's different, you don't fit in, you keep getting in trouble. Why can't you keep a job? Why is he or she homeless? As though sometimes there really is a choice, and there is not for many of them. And that is the population that I deal with. And what we have to do in our interventions are what we call cognitive behavioral therapy. Those are with licensed professional counselors, with psychiatrists. We're lucky in DeKalb that we have a psychiatrist in-house on our staff who can help us with medication management for the participants in my program. They are all high risk, high need. We provide housing. We provide healthcare, because a lot of people, if they're not maintaining their mental health, they're not maintaining their physical health either. And so we see the emergence of a lot of health issues. And no, I'm not a social worker. I am a judge. I hear murder cases. But this is important because it intersects in every type of case I have, whether it's a shoplifting case that's treated as a felony offense or a murder. It comes up oftentimes. That is the intersection of untreated mental illness. Now, I would be lying to you if I said that everybody has gotten on board. All of our communities understand mental illness, and the criminal justice system has caught up to what's happening in this population. It hasn't. But I'm really proud of the work because it's a mentality shift, quite frankly. And I think the people who are most involved with individuals day to day, whether it's their probation officers, because somewhere along the lines, way back when nobody was talking about this, they got sentenced for 12 other shoplifting offenses for stealing the same thing from the same place, it finally dawns on somebody that something's wrong. This is not just what we call a criminogenic factor of them wanting to commit crime. There's something else going on here. And the question is what is that something else? And then that takes me to the next step of where they come to me. I'm a reporting court. So they go to treatment during the week. They go to group therapy. They go to individual therapy. They go to stress management. They go to trauma therapy. A lot of these people have dealt with the trauma of sexual abuse and the trauma of physical abuse, never addressed. And Dr. Gay, I'm sure we'll talk about that later and what that looks like. And Maoli will talk about how that manifests itself with people on the street who are undergoing a crisis oftentimes. But when they get to me, it's really important that I am there to be sort of the person that can bring it together and to hold them accountable, because there's a role that they play in this too. They're human beings as well. We get them to manage their medication and to be, fairly high functioning, many of them, and to believe in themselves once and for all, that they don't need to live under the stigma of being mentally ill. They can be contributing members to society. They can work. They can do community service. They can follow the law. They can know when they're about to be in crisis. They can know when they need to refill their medications, and they can show up and be proud of who they are. And so that's the work that I do. It's imperfect, but I think with the advent of more of these kind of courts coming online, not just in Georgia, but around the country, I hope that we will see a change in our Black and brown communities.
Let me ask you, Judge Jackson, Dr. Gay, do you think these mental health courts, is trauma a big part of what we've been seeing, a big problem? I'm sure Dr. Gay will talk about that, but do you think they run the danger of stigmatizing defendants with mental illness, and that creates more of a problem?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I want Dr. Gay to talk about this, because education is really important for me. As you can see, I try to educate myself as well, but just because it's interesting. And it helps me to understand and how to address the people that come in front of me. But on the stigmatizing part, the beauty of being in an accountability court is your charges are dismissed, and there's no label there that you're in a quote unquote mental health court. It's nowhere in the public record. So there's no danger from our perspective. We're healthy and we're moving forward.
That's awesome. Dr. Gay?
Yeah, that is the sticky question, right? Because we understand the history of stigma and how that can prevent people from being able to just access, quality of life moving forward. What we do run the danger of, however, is if we identify the flu as just a common cold, are we really treating that problem? And are we really allowing folks to know within the community, hey, listen, we have an issue with the flu right here, as opposed to saying, it's just a common cold. So when we identify, and even as I've gone through the various county Department of Public Health annual reports, and I really kind of dig deep into the data and see, exactly which mental illnesses are being exacerbated in which areas of the county, because that helps us to allow us to build program designs and being able to target specific populations and say, hey, listen, we know in Cobb County, that they, during this period of time, anxiety goes through the roof. Let's figure out why, and let's see what's going on. Because when we do that and we use what's given to us in an appropriate way, not only are we, removing the stigma, and taking the shame away from it, but we're creating real world solutions in real time. And that allows us to be able to see some of those, the positive outcomes that we really want to be able to see within our locale and within our society here in Atlanta.
Karen,
Maoli?
I just wanted to jump in and while I led with the case of Shali Tilson as, for me, a failure in our criminal justice system as it relates to mental health crises, I do want to lift up the case of Basil Ellaby. Basil Ellaby was the homeless, drug addicted brother who was falsely accused of bringing down the I-85 bridge. And we were able to, not because he was guilty of anything, but because he thought, and we thought it was in his best interest to enter behavioral court in Fulton County. It took him 2 years to complete it. He was provided a level of support that he needed. What people don't know, and what he's given us permission to share, is that he had been abused as a child, as a young child. He had been in foster care. So, he was medicating himself at the age of 21 and became addicted and struggled and continues to battle, but he was in the throes of his addiction and homelessness for over 20 years. And what behavioral court provided was an opportunity for him to gain some stability, some structure, some services. And as of today, he's almost 4 years clean and sober. He continues in various counseling programs. He continues to work with our organizations, the Black Man Lab and Let Us Make Man. And so I do want, because Judge Jackson talks about the court and the possibilities and some of the good outcomes. And while this is Fulton County, I just want people to know that's why we have to invest in this versus just in incarceration. Because if we did not have that program, we would have tried that case and acquitted him. We believe he would have been acquitted, but he would have been without the support. So, that's just something that I wanted to lift up as an example of how things when we set up these courts, that it does have possible, very incredible potential for those that are going through it.
And that's a perfect example because as you saw, his picture was everywhere. He was being blamed for shutting down that bridge and causing Buford Highway connector there. 85 was shut down for weeks. So yeah, getting him help, most important thing. And that moves us to that next question. In 2016, the imprisonment rate for Black and African-American men 6 times greater than that for white men. And for Black and African-American women, it was double.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing to look at. Have the courts, do you think, and looking at Mr. Ellerby, started looking at trauma, risk factors like that, Attorney Davis, associated with trauma in young people to just see why they're there and what kind of support they may need? And then want to see if lawyers like you have started looking at trauma and risk factors, which obviously you have, mentioning Mr. Ellerby. And how do you actually connect more people to treatment instead of getting them incarcerated?
So Karen, that's an incredible question because it's layered. So one of our challenges is this: we should not wait to provide treatment to people when they get incarcerated. We have, especially our young people, we have to have programs, what we call are enough, we say EQT, enough quality touches, right? So our young people have to have enough quality touches to be successful. And those quality touches also allow responsible adults to identify young people who are having mental health crises. And we're able to redirect. And so in Black Man Lab, one of our nonprofits that we work with, at the beginning of each lab, we ask the brothers if anybody is feeling as though they need what we call as some extra Black man love, come on up to the front. And so brothers come to the front. And we just came back in person post-pandemic last Monday at the Andrew and Walter Young YMCA. But these brothers come up to the front and brothers come up and hug them. And brothers will break down in tears because you don't know what is going on in these young brothers' minds. And our focus areas, young people from 15 to 26. And so we just surround them and love them. And afterwards, a brother will come up to him and ask, hey, do you need some additional support outside of this? And so we have counselors who we can direct them to get that treatment. So I really want us to, as a community, to be more proactive in saying, hey, I see you, I understand, I feel that something, it might be off, you're not feeling right. It's okay. Share that with us and we'll help you and we'll support you. And that I think is critically important. I think while the programs that we are seeing established in the court system are obviously helpful, the numbers that you mentioned in incarceration is just overwhelming. And what we also know is that a large population, unfortunately, I think it was Rikers Island. I was just with a brother, he said 57% of the folks that are in Rikers Island, they are saying have mental health issues. So Why are they in jail? Why are they in jail? That's not the right place for them. If they're having some mental health issues and challenges, we've got to get them help. And that, I think, report just recently came out. So the work is to decriminalize mental health, because it's not a criminal condition. It is a health condition that deserves our resources, and it's the redirection. And I'll be quiet after this. People say, defund the police is a bad thing. And what we're really saying is, let's redirect resources rather than having to try to get more police to be out on the street. Let's redirect resources to provide funding to programs that are proactive, that address mental health, that make sure that there are things that our young people can be involved in, and they feel affirmed in who they are as people.
Judge Jackson, this next question for you. Many individuals who end up in the mental courts, we find out, have already been in the mental health system. So are you finding any evidence that these courts are going to bring about any type of different result in what happens? Let's get your mic.
I did it again. What I was trying to say is that, I would push against that statement ever so slightly from the following perspective. When we do intakes specifically for mental health court, one of the criteria, if you will, nationwide, is that you want to have an evidence-based treatment program. The reason you want to do that is because funders want to see, how successful they think these programs are. And let's just be honest, I'm part of a system. I didn't create it, but I'm part of it. It's my job. And that's why we're all here, because we're servant-hearted, to push against that and to be culturally competent within the framework of what we do. And so having said that, with that in the backdrop, what I'll tell you is a lot of, especially Black and Brown individuals who come into the court system who have demonstrated mental illness, oftentimes don't have a diagnosis, as I said before. You may think, or they may think, they've had a prior hospitalization or touch with a treatment provider, but they don't know where, when, they heard it somewhere. It may not even be accurate. I will tell you, there's a young man that's in my program now, and I asked him to partner with me to be really committed to figuring out what his diagnosis is. He didn't want to accept what it was because he said he had been told since he was 7 that he was psychotic. That was the term that had been used in this, that he was crazy and psychotic. And if you can imagine, for young people in particular, it's very hard to get them to accept the idea of treatment, going to the doctor, certainly going to a psychiatrist, because in their vernacular, that meant they were crazy. And everybody knows, and in Black and Brown communities, everybody would say, well, that's my crazy uncle, and he's in the back room. We just keep him in the back room. There's still that thought process going on. So you know what I say now, because as a Superior Court judge with a general jurisdiction docket, and I do family law as well, and I'm happy about this. Now what's come online are family treatment courts, because oftentimes you can't treat the individual in a criminal setting unless you address some of the family cycle of illness and trauma and how people treat one another. And so what I would say about that is we're doing better now, finally, within this system, to try to get people a proper diagnosis, to remove the labels, if you will, and to try to figure out how best to treat the family unit. I have a friend who's a doctor, and one thing she said to me was, when she went back to do a second residency at Morehouse in family medicine after having done obstetrics and gynecology, is she said, Asha, I want to treat the whole family, because there are certain things that you find in terms of the family genealogy that correlate with a health condition of an individual. So if I want to practice where if I'm treating the mother, I want the grandmother and the grandfather, and I want the children, so that I can get a holistic view of their health habits. It's the same thing with mental illness, or behavioral health, or whatever term we want to give it. So what I say, even when I'm doing family cases, because I send a lot of people to therapy and I help them to find the right treatment and therapy. And I say, listen, therapy is in vogue. We all need it. Whether you need somebody that you can talk to and can coach you to enhance your professional life and prospects, or whether it's your mental illness and how you feel, it's in vogue. It's a good thing. And then there are a lot of providers who are doing this therapy, like Dr. Gay said, and making it affordable. That was something that just wasn't an option for us. There weren't a lot of us doing the therapy. That's the cultural competency piece. So that's becoming, they're becoming greater resources in that area, but also making it affordable and obtainable. And we can go on and on and on and talk about this, but seeing that it's part of a lot of people's healthcare plans is really refreshing to me. And that employers think that this is important. And most importantly, that community people think it's important. My hope is that we'll just all continue on the educational side to pull people into this. So it's a misdiagnosis, and it's not always because, the courts missed it. People have to better understand what's going on as well.
You brought up some very, very important points. One being African Americans, Black community don't like to go. Sorry, Dr. Gay, we love you, but don't like to go and get help, no matter what has happened in their lives, in their family, the trauma they've seen. So it is important to make that more in vogue. As you said, Judge, it's going to have to happen, or else we're going to continue this cycle. Dr. Gay, we looked at some more numbers. Black African-American people, as we know, overrepresented in our jails, in our prison systems. We make up 13% of the general US population, but when you look at jail, we make up nearly 40% of those incarcerated. We know that's got to change. From your experience, can you discuss how this statistic has actually impacted mental health in the Black community? And can you discuss some factors that may actually be leading to over-incarceration? Is it this unknown of mental health issues that people are going through, and that's, the easiest place to throw them, in jail?
Yeah, and so if we're looking at how we got to where we are now, of course, it has roots in things that were going on in the 80s and the 90s, as I mentioned earlier. But also what was not going on with some of the conversation, like listen to what we just heard a second ago from an attorney and a judge. And I'm just sitting here just smiling and smirking, as you can see, because, they're speaking the language. They're understanding how the processes actually work. Sometimes we get a little hands off when we talk about mental health because we don't want to offend. We don't want to breach confidentiality. And we just really aren't sure how to speak towards it, but the conversation, because we're talking about it so much, and this is beyond just being in vogue, right? It's recognizing that this medical specialty is just as important, or even more important than some of the other medical specialties that we pay top dollar for. So we are actually shifting how our society will forever look at mental health, mental wellness, mental illness, emotional health, regulation, behavior modification, substance abuse, anger management, conflict resolution. All those things fall up under that umbrella. And so to swing back to the question, I just wanted to recognize that, because I think that's very important, and it's a key component that's been missing for a long time, especially when certain populations have been targeted by the criminal justice system and there was no voice to be able to speak towards these things for a long time. I think in terms of what has led to, an overrepresentation of people of color in jails is that, for one, the value of individuals is so stratified within our society. And when we place different values on people, then we say, hey, you know what, this person deserved to go to jail. We're not going to look at this person's, emotional history or history of abuse. This person, we heard on social media that this person burned a bridge down. They caused a whole bunch of inconvenience. Throw them in jail and throw them under the jail just because, right? We as a people really have to do a little bit of self-checking and recognizing that everyone within our society has value. It's just that certain people have been given opportunities and certain people have taken advantage of those things. And other people may make mistakes or just are born in different circumstances. There was a direct targeting of certain individuals, low income individuals, for several decades. And that just made it very easy to fill our prisons to meet certain mandates from a legislative perspective. And then when we even saw the relationship, the public-private partnership with private correctional facilities, that took things to the next level. So we are in this process of, the Academy of Social Work calls it smart decarceration. How do we, approach criminal justice from a smart perspective and also reduce the number of individuals that will have to go through this warehousing process in jail? And then what significant investments can we make both in mental health and community resources and advocacy, so that when individuals do present behavioral challenges on the front end at the early age, we can use prevention models as opposed to having to do intervention on a criminal level and then also on a judicious and a health level. So if we start treating behavior as a health issue and not as a criminal issue, I can promise you we will see significant decreases in criminal behavior, criminal activity, recidivism, et cetera, by implementing a new way of living and approaching life and interacting with one another on the front end through prevention, as opposed to waiting till after crime has been committed and having to create intervention programs.
Let me say this, just to get off topic a little bit, not really, but Judge Jackson, you talked about this as well. Let's look back at this past year, what we've seen, what we watched unfold when it came to George Floyd, when it came to Ahmaud Arbery, some of the cases that are still in our headlines when it came to the 2 students at the AU Center, going through all of this. Do we ever look at what may be going on in the heads and the minds of some of the people who are incarcerating these young Black men and women? Is there a possibility that there's some trauma there as well that's not been addressed? How do we handle this? How do we not continue this cycle that we've been seeing? Attorney Davis?
Well, we all need counseling all the time. And I share with my young people that are in Black Man Lab, and I say it, without any reservation. I'm like, bruh, like, I go to counseling. I do counseling with my family. That's, it's like having a car and just driving it and never thinking you got to go get a tune-up. It's going to break down. And with all of the wear and tear that this world puts on Black people, we've got to go check in on a regular basis, and not just the physical check-in, but these mental health check-ins, because it is happening to us. This is an overwhelming situation to be in, to have this kind of oppression heaped upon our shoulders. And for years, generation after generation, we're experiencing this trauma. And so I think definitely those in law enforcement need to seek counseling, be given counseling, have mental health evaluations, and for it not to be something that is stigmatized in any way. It is just, it has to become like you go to the dentist, you go get a physical checkup. This should become commonplace throughout our community. And that work is, I really believe, what we see with what Shanti has done here, to put this at the top of our minds as a community, and not allow us to think that it's somebody else's issue. It's ours, right? We got to say, I want my sons to be able to come to me and say, hey, Dad, help me get the support that I need.
Before it's too late.
But yeah, and because we see it all the time, and you unfortunately, in the way our communication is with so much texting, and sometimes you just got to get in their face. I mean, how you doing? You okay? During the pandemic, we've had 3 of our young people that are part of Black Man Lab who have come to us and said, hey, help me. And we have been able to get, with their family, get them the support that they need. But part of it is that we built a level of trust with them, for them to feel as though they were comfortable to say, I need help. And so that's the work of building community, of really rebuilding community, and not being in our silos. And that's what I'm grateful for Silence the Shame in this work, in that it gives us a platform to have this conversation and it not be weird or awkward. It's just hey, we need to talk about this. You good? I'm good. And I'll say this and be quiet. One of my adopted godsons, DK out of Macon, you know, he's a hip hop artist, and he, you know, his dad, Dr. Pee Wee, real good friends with Shanti and Nate, created a song and music, you know, and so we have to do that, right, to address it and get it cool to do to address behavioral, mental health, all of whatever umbrella it fits under, so that our young people are like, okay, I got it. I'm not tripping. I need to be able to have these conversations. So.
And let me say, so many of us are so busy, we're not paying attention, Dr. Gay, we're missing signs, we're missing signals, we're missing our young people, as Attorney Davis just said, we're missing them letting us know that they need help, finding out if they're depressed, if, you know, with this latest pandemic, they've been at home all this time, you know, anxiety sets up. What can we do as community, as a village, to grab these signs and do something about it?
Yeah, Karen, we saw a 400% increase in requests for services last year. You know, not only with the pandemic going on, the fear of losing jobs, the fear of, you know, the racial instability. You know, we had an election last year. It was mass chaos. So business-wise, you know, we were really able to step in, you know, and be a true go-to resource. We did a number of panels. You know, we were just busy nonstop. So in terms of, you know, how can we start to look at things on the front end? Number one, we're going to continue to normalize these conversations within our homes frequently, right? We don't wait until we notice a sign. We talk to our kids. We talk to our, you know, our spouses. We start to have more conversations. You know, even if you have, you know, young folks that, you know, are on the phones, you know, we create Slack groups, or we create group meetings. We meet them where they are, and we communicate, and we reach out, and we touch, and we stay connected. Because if you don't, right, the device actually leaves the child to so many of their own devices, right? To be able to get into things that make them feel good. There's a community, and there's a welcoming group for any and every social issue or topic out here. So you'd best better, you know, have a true understanding of your family members by having conversations, getting outside the home, spending time outside together. Staying engaged is the most important way, not only to know what's kind of going on, but also to be able to prevent some things. One thing I will say is that young folks, in particular young males, are going to therapy. We have dads going to therapy, families and couples. We saw a lot of couples that ended up coming to therapy because they were just around each other, you know, a whole lot last year. And so now they start to really and truly get to know one another, right? You know, so people are going to therapy. People are coming and they're staying, not just coming for one session and leaving. They're coming and they're staying because once they get to us, then they have kind of gone through a couple different, you know, options. They tried a few things. They say, all right, I'm gonna try this thing out since y'all keep talking about it. And when they come, they stay, and we have a great time. So if we can just get folks connected and get them to us, we are available, we are licensed, we are trained, and we're ready to roll. And we're doing our best to get our services marketed and connected to the community, so that they know that they now have a safe space for them to come to, be able to purge and get all these things out, and then actually get true clinical work that's going to get them to a better place and better health outcomes. So that's why, you know, at my practice, we say we're changing lives and healing families every single day, you know, because we get to have direct, immediate impact on individuals. So ask questions, you know, have conversations, you know, give examples of where, you know, you made some mistakes when you were a child and were a teenager. You know, let them know, you know, that the expectation is not going to be perfect, right? You know, but it is for you to trust, for you to ask questions, right? And for you to know that, you know, you do have a support system. Having, you know, last point, whether we want to believe it or not, children love structure. They love structure because it shows that someone cares about them, that someone is thinking about them, and that there's some resources already in place. We add a little fun to it. Now we've gotten their attention. All right. So I got my start in this field working in group homes in Atlanta, you know, working with kids that were in YDC and DFACS and DJJ and all that. Right. But what I came to understand was that, you know, these kids, if you have the right seeds planted into them, oh, they can really kind of bear some really, really good fruit. And so we dare not push a certain group of kids aside just because they come to the table with a few different social challenges. We buttress ourselves up and we get ourselves in a place to where we can support them. And that way we start to eliminate all these different issues that we see going on in Atlanta right now is a reflection of us operating in silos, not having a unified front and a system in place. So that's why we are having this conversation. We're getting connected. We're already exchanging information so that post-conversation we can implement and then actually create and yield those outcomes that we say we want to see.
Awesome, Dr. Gay. The news director over there, Shanti Das, telling me we have about 8 minutes left before we are done. So any questions out there from folks who are watching? And while we're waiting for those questions, Judge Jackson, just want to say too, are you seeing more young people coming into your court as your Superior Court judge? You're seeing some of these hard crimes, but we're also seeing some of our young Black, brown people being charged with serious crimes.
Absolutely. And it's unfortunate, but it's a great segue for me to talk about the program, the other program I created, which is Project Pinnacle, and Mawali Davis, as well as Shanti Das. And I hope now Dr. Gay and yourself, Karen, will also become part of our family. This is the young offender group of 17 to 26-year-olds that come into the courts. They are charged with a first time, usually nonviolent offense, but a felony no less. And I was just sitting here listening to Dr. Gay and his excitement about working with people in therapy, because I'm thinking about, I'm now going to be working with an 11th group of first-time nonviolent offenders since I got on the bench in 2012, and not one of them has recidivated. That term means to commit an additional crime, not one. And it really is because of the investment of these people who have come. They're like sponges. There's an arrested development in terms of who they were told they are and who they were told they can be. And for once, for an intensive 1-year program, and it was something I just decided to do because I looked around and everybody in the courtroom was in that age range, and the recommendation was that they be sent to prison for a year for a residential burglary. And I was like, that's going to be everybody in here. It's going to be everybody in here. And I said, no more. And I took my tort liability commercial litigation self and background, and I created Project Pinnacle, and I didn't ask for one dime. So that tells you that doing this kind of work that we're talking about, still haven't asked for one dime, by the way. It's been through the donations and the contributions of time of individuals like Dr. Gay and like Attorney Mawali Davis, I know how to say his name correctly, Mawali Davis, as well as Shanti Das coming and lending their expertise and their perspective. And these young people eat it up because no one's ever done that for them. And you know what? They push back and they go, okay, this is great, Judge Jackson, but I got to go back to my same neighborhood and my same problems. What should I do? And we empower them over. That's why I said it's got to be over a year. I'm not going to just mentor you and find you a mentor. We're going to work with you intensively. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence. That's something that a lot of people just don't have. We're going to talk about critical decision making. We're going to talk about effective listening and communication, and some of the reasons why that was never addressed when they were in primary school, and what those challenges presented to them being able to actually get through a job interview or taking a test, why they can't do that. What's wrong with me? What's the problem with my brain and the way that I process? We roll it all the way back before we get to things like interviewing skills and how to dress for an interview. That's way down the line in my program. We start all the way back, and we have licensed professional counselors come and work with them on anger management. And by the way, Dr. Gay, that's because they asked me for it. That was something that Pinnacle 2 asked for. So it's now part of the curriculum some 8 years later. And they say every single time, nobody ever made this level of investment. They just wanted to know that they had structure and that someone cared, like you said. And what that led to is productive people who are not getting in trouble, who are going to therapy, who are getting counseling and treatment, who now feel confident that they can actually be contributing members of society. So to answer your question, you walk right into it for me, because I'll talk about Project Pinnacle until the cows come home, because we're spending money to incarcerate individuals. And this is a problem that everybody agrees, regardless of political party, that you can't incarcerate away the issue of mental illness. By the way, you can't incarcerate the issue of substance abuse away, and they go hand in hand. So we put people in our drug court program they probably have a mental health diagnosis in the DSM, which is, the manual for determining for insurance purposes and treatment and clinical purposes what someone's diagnosis is. Every single person probably has something in or all of us here probably have something in the DSM now I think about it. But it's just which issue is more persistent. Is it the substance abuse or is it the mental illness? And that's how we decide which program we put folks into in our courts. There's always an intersection though, and it always most likely involves a family history. And for these young people and people who are not so young to finally understand what this means, that it's generational, that they can break the cycle, that they can get through this, that they can get treatment, that they will deal with this for life. Just like sometimes some chronic illnesses, but they can't actually deal with it and they have the tools to deal with it. It's really quite life-changing for people. And we know it works.
And it does. 3 minutes left. Want everybody to wrap by saying how, got people here who are excited about this conversation. How can people get in contact with you as panelists? And I want to quickly say, Attorney Davis, what were you telling Roland Martin about an arrest? We have to get the tea here. What happened?
Really quickly, there were a group, obviously last week, our sisters came to the Capitol raising the issue of voting rights. This week, brothers came led by Cliff Albright of Black Voters Matter. So our congressman from Georgia, Hank Johnson, was arrested with 9 of us, including one of my law partners, Francis Johnson, Rashad Robinson from Color of Change, and other brothers who just said, we have to take a stand right now on voting rights and that we're willing to give up our liberty for that. And so that's why I'm in DC. I was just glad they released me in time to make this program and be a part of this, because it's all interconnected. When we feel disempowered, disenfranchised, there's a level of hopelessness. But what we do know is that when Black males are engaged in what they believe is a righteous fight, a fight that can be transformative, then our esteem is lifted, because we, for a moment, right, see our value to our people. And so what we have been saying, and I'll end with this, if you go to mawaleedavis.com, we did a book called We Need You, Encouraging My Son's Generation for Black Liberation. And it is an invitation to the movement to do this work, the work of decriminalizing our people, mental health, all of what we experience. And so I'm, again, grateful to be a part of this conversation. Thank y'all. Thank you, Karen. Good to see you, homegirl.
All right, great to see you. Chief Judge Asha Jackson, how can they get a hold of you?
So I just put my phone number and email address in the chat. We would love to have your support for the accountability courts. It is, if you want to come to a graduation, it's pretty amazing to hear the testimonies and the stories of success. It's life-changing for a lot of people. Similarly for Project Pinnacle, which is the group of young people, young adults between the ages of 17 to 25 who I work with, we would love to have your support, whether it's in the short run, if you want to do a service project or participate in one of our sessions during the year, or whether you would like to be a mentor, which is equally as important to the success of the young people in our program. But thank you so much for being interested in listening today and for wanting to do the work.
Love it. And Dr. Vaughn Gay, we all need to go see.
And listen, I have 2 therapists that I see as well, so this is not something that we just talk about, we actively participate. As a son of the city, being born and raised, I genuinely want to thank all 3 of you for the work that you all have done over the years. I've been able to watch you all's careers and see the impact you all have had, on Atlanta. So thank you so much. In order to get in contact with us, to be able to start your therapeutic journey, I did list our information in the chat. Referral@holisticatlanta.com is the best way to get in contact with us. we'll send you a referral form, and then our team will process that information and get you connected with a therapist as soon as possible. Our website is www.holisticatlanta.com. And also you can, I think a really good landing page for us is our link tree. You just search for Holistic Atlanta. That gives you links to surveys that we're doing right now to collect data for our community to improve our services. We have podcasts, plenty of interviews and talks with Shanti Das and Silence the Shame. That's really our landing page where you can get all the content online from us. So we appreciate you all having us as part of this conversation, and we understand the importance of bringing together these different lanes and these different fields together so that we can create some real solutions. So thank you so much once again.
I've written it all down, and let me turn it back over to Shanti and Jewel. Thank you so much, everyone who's been out there. Hopefully we have shined a little light on what we've been talking about and what we need to see changed in our communities. Jewel, Shanti, back to you.
I'll just jump in really quickly. I'm off camera because I've been a little under the weather, but oh my God, Judge Jackson, Mawali, Dr. Gay, Karen, I cannot thank you all enough. I feel like this is such important work and we're just getting started. So I feel like we've kind of assembled a dream team here, if you will. So there's so much more work to be done as the community starts to open back up. Whatever else we can do with both of your programs, Judge Jackson, Mawali, whatever we can do to support you, your team, some of the young men and women that you represent, we really do want to pour into them. And as Judge Jackson said, it takes a year or more, right? It takes time. We're not just going to mentor you and just send you this video and say, hey, check it out, and that's it. No, let's get into the schools. Let's send this recording to law enforcement. Let's force these, mayoral candidates in the city of Atlanta and folks beyond, because we have people looking and listening, and we are a national organization, but let's take it to Washington, Mawali. Let's really silence the shame around incarceration and mental illness and get people the help that they need. It is an honor and a pleasure to be able to do this work. I will let our executive director, Jewel Gooding, take us out, but always a pleasure. And I can't wait to see your lovely faces in person soon.
Absolutely. There is not really much else I can say after all of that. I do want to thank you all again for your attention. And hopefully you all will share this content, because this was amazing. This was an amazing panel. It touched every point that we really wanted to make sure that the community was more aware of. So let's keep having these conversations and really silence the shame. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.